But also, what about this idea of withdrawing from the ECHR, the European Convention on Human Rights? Well, the front page story today in the Times says that it would not jeopardise the peace in Northern Ireland or the Ulster peace in a report endorsed by Labour Home Secretary Jack Straw. A study by the Policy Exchange, and you'll hear from a senior member a little bit later, says the argument widely circulated is, quotes, groundless, and nothing in the UK's commitments to the peace process in Northern Ireland requires it to remain a part of the convention. Goodness. Let's turn first to Richard Ekins, who is a KC and Professor of Law and Constitutional Government at Oxford University, head of the Judicial Power Project at the Policy Exchange, which, of course, is behind this report. Good to have you on, Professor. Then, can we sort of do this chronologically, sir? What was the, if I may call it, the myth that was expounded and seemed to gain so much weight? Good morning.
Good morning. So it's almost been conventional wisdom in certain establishment circles, I think, that by agreeing the Good Friday, the Belfast Agreement, the UK undertook to remain a member state of the ECHR, and that if we were to leave the ECHR, we, the UK, would be breaching the Good Friday Agreement and undermining the peace process. And our report, Policy Exchange today, really examines the Belfast Agreement in close detail and argues that it says no such thing. So there's no such requirement in the UK.
In everyday language, Professor, what have you and your colleagues found for the Policy Exchange?
Leaving the ECHR would not breach the Belfast Agreement.
How come no one else has thought of this, Professor?
Well, we have said something similar before. The significance of our report today, I think, is that we go through the Belfast Agreement in pretty exhaustive detail. There are two parts to the agreement. One's a treaty between Britain and Ireland, and one is the multi-party agreement amongst the parties of Northern Ireland with participation from the British and Irish governments. And we really go through that in quite some detail. It's true that the multi-party agreement amongst the various states mentions the ECHR, but all those references concern the law of Northern Ireland. They don't concern the UK's membership of the ECHR. That's a vital point which we stress.
How significant is the support of Jack, now Lord Straw?
I think it's quite significant. He doesn't take the view that we should leave the ECHR, and our report is not an argument for leaving the ECHR, but it's pretty significant, I think, that he, as a member of the cabinet that agreed the Good Friday Agreement, and someone who doesn't at present want to leave the convention, thinks we have a strong argument that we've sort of cleared the ground for the debate. Now we can have the argument about leaving the ECHR on the merits, and those who want to remain members of the convention, which is a respectable position, can bring forward the best arguments they have. They can't do what they have been doing, or many of them at least have been doing up until now, which is saying this is a non-starter because if you undertake to leave the convention, you're ripping up the Good Friday Agreement. It's not true.
What do you think the impact could be if we allow that this is in conversation because of the concerns over what are called small boat crossings or migrant crossings? What do you believe the impact might be, Professor?
Sorry, can you ask that question again?
What would the impact be? If as regards the migrant, if I can call it the migrant crisis or small boat crossing, crisis. Whatever you want to call it.
No, I think it's, Policy Exchange have written many interventions on the small boats crisis, how to address it. I think certainly leaving the ECHR would help address that crisis. It's a complex crisis, of course. Part of it's practical and logistical and requires diplomatic efforts. But there's no question that the European Human Rights Court's case law very significantly restricts the freedom of our government to address the border crisis in a way that is not grounded in the treaty, the convention that was actually agreed in 1950. The European Court of Human Rights has made up a Europe-wide law of migration and asylum, and I'm encouraged by the widespread and now cross-party concern about the court's extravagant lawmaking, which shouldn't have taken place and should be addressed.
Lastly, can we look at the look it might give? As recently as this summer, the Prime Minister said it would put us on a par with countries such as Russia and others if we were to leave the ECHR. How would you counter that criticism or that assertion?
I think the argument from the Good Friday Belfast Agreement is a serious argument. I think the argument from the comparison with Belarus is not a serious argument. It's a ridiculous comparison. As someone who comes from New Zealand and is not a state that member of the European Convention on Human Rights, it's not a badge of civilization being subject to the jurisdiction of the Strasbourg Court. This country would be perfectly capable of decent government if not subject to that jurisdiction. So the comparison with Belarus is ludicrous and should be abandoned.
Appreciate your time this morning. Thank you to you and your colleagues for the report you've put out. Richard Ekins is a KC and Professor of Law and Constitutional Government at Oxford University and heads the Judicial Power Project at Policy Exchange, which is behind the report, which has been endorsed by Labour grandee Jack Straw.